Good stuff. Just let me know when everybody's in, Robin.
I'd say you're probably good to go, to be honest. Might as well make a start.
Brilliant. Okay, well, hello everybody and welcome to TCM's first culture clinic. So today is going to be focusing on workplace wellbeing, which is a subject exceptionally close to my heart. If anybody's known me for more than 30 seconds, you'll know that I'm always talking about making sure that our well-being is looked after both at home and at work as well. So it's something I'm hugely passionate about in both scenarios. So some of the things I'm going to cover today, I'm going to talk a little bit about some recent research that's come out from the CIPD, and also hopefully help you understand that there's more than meets the eye when it comes to well-being. So we'll be talking a little bit later on about what lies beneath. So we'll talk about that a little bit later on. But just before I sort of get into that a little bit more, if you just use the chat function, what I'd like to know is, how are you feeling today? So what's going on for you today? How are things? So for me, bit of a tired one today. Bit of a tired one. I was in Bristol yesterday. I'm based in Sheffield, so I was in Bristol yesterday driving back. A little bit tired today, feeling it a bit. Yeah. So a few of the comments, tired. I don't know what it is at the moment. Everybody just feels tired at the moment. I don't know how much of that is the constant working from home, the constant information. I don't know. A few people feeling fed up, a bit anxious. Not bad. Typical non-committal response. Yeah, when anybody asks how are you doing, we're tempted to answer with the response, yeah, I'm fine. We feel like we don't want to burden people. We don't want to share necessarily. It's not the right person to share with. It's good to see that a few people are feeling good though. Yeah, people looking forward to the weekend. Yeah, we're getting closer. We're over the halfway mark now. Yeah, how often do you get asked how you're feeling? Is it something you get asked a lot? It's one of those questions that, as somebody's just said, only certain people will ask you. And out of those, there's probably only certain people that mean it genuinely. You know, they genuinely don't want to know how they're feeling. That's interesting. Never when working from home. The well-being side, I've noticed, has got lost a little bit with the working from home because we're not in the office. We don't bump into each other in hallways and corridors. We don't see each other in the canteen. We don't have an opportunity to sort of pop by somebody's desk, how are you doing today? You know, and have those general chit chats. It's a little bit more difficult with the online world. So my next question for you, accidentally muted me. How often do you bring your whole self to work? How often do you bring the real you to work? That's good. 90–80% of the time, often. Most of the time I'm a terrible actor. Yeah, I'm in that boat as well, I have to say. Yeah, depends on the day. There's quite a few that are in the 80s and 90s, but there's a few as well that 65% and lower. What's stopping you from coming forward? So what's stopping you, those people that are sort of 80% and below, what's stopping you from bringing your whole self to work? I know on the days I struggle, it is sometimes about, you know what, I'm at work and it's nice just to leave it at home. I don't want to bring that to work. Judgment, yeah, absolutely. One of the biggest things I found, I'm a mental health first aid instructor. One of the biggest things that I found is that people don't talk about how they're feeling, what's going on for them, for fear of judgment. Wanting to remain professional at work, yeah, absolutely. Something I hear a lot of as well. So when we're talking about workplace well-being, it is about how well are we feeling when we're at work. And it depends on a lot of factors. It depends on internal factors, so the stuff that goes on in the workplace, and external factors, because we don't automatically go into a pod at the end of the day. We have lives. We don't get shoved in a cupboard once we leave the office each day. So we have things that go on outside of work as well. So outside of work could be things like our physical wellness. Do we have any long-term conditions? What's our life like outside of work? Do we care for somebody, whether it be children, elderly, or somebody with a long-term illness? What are our finances like? Quite often when we talk about workplace wellbeing, it's those kind of things that get forgotten about. We focus a lot on the mental health. The conversation around mental health has got so much better in recent years, but there is more to wellbeing than just mental health. Okay, so the internal things we're going to talk a little bit more about. The workplace culture. Is our culture conducive to having those conversations in the workplace, to bringing our whole selves to work? And part of that is also psychological safety. So how safe do we feel at work? I have a model that's called I'm Safe. That stands for integrity. So how honest and truthful is your working environment? How honest and truthful are those people around you? Can you trust who you work with? The M stands for me. So what do I bring each day to work? What's my background? What's my education? What's my understanding? What life do I have outside of the workplace? In terms of the safe elements, safe, S stands for security. How consistent is our work? How predictable is it? Is change managed in a compassionate and engaging way? Autonomy. How much control do we have over our work? Are we able to make informed decisions about our working environment? Are we able to make decisions around what we're doing? Fairness. Are we treated justly? And also, are those around us treated justly as well? Are we viewing that fairness from both receiver and witness? And finally, the E, empathy. Anybody that's ever heard of Brené Brown, you'll know that I talk about Brené Brown quite a lot. Brené Brown talks about empathy as about recognizing that somebody's perception is their truth and recognizing the emotion that goes with it. Empathy isn't sympathy. So that's what I'm safe for. Is your working environment a safe environment, a psychologically safe environment? And part of well-being as well is how fulfilled do we feel? Work is a huge part of that. We spend a lot of time at work. Do you actually enjoy what you do? Do you work to live or live to work? Or are you somewhere in the middle? You enjoy being at work, but you also enjoy being at home. That's where we need to be, that both sides enjoying. So how supported, encouraged and empowered is your workforce? Are they encouraged to bring their whole selves to work? That's not about breaching the line of professionalism. That's about, can they be honest and true to themselves at work, as well as those being honest and true around them? So I said mental health is an important part of workplace wellbeing. It's a huge, huge part, but it's not just that. So substance misuse is something that is on the increase, unfortunately. Smoking cessation. These are what we're talking about when we're talking about workplace wellbeing. Reproductive health. Some of the things that actually fall under wellbeing are the things that we get a bit embarrassed about talking about. We don't want to talk about periods. We don't want to talk about prostate cancer and those kind of things. But there is importance to workplace wellbeing as the mental health. Is somebody that works for you going through domestic abuse? What's their sleep like? Are they the kind of person that has terrible sleep hygiene? These are the things that don't always get focused on when we talk about workplace wellbeing. Often, if it's a subject we don't want to talk about, it's a subject that we need support with. As I say, we don't drag ourselves out of a cupboard every morning. We're it's not the Matrix. We're not coming out of that pod every day and being what we're expected to be and then disappearing off. We bring our lives to work. Why is well-being important? Really, really key question. So there's several reasons why. The first one is that psychological safety, so that people feel psychologically and physically safe to come to work. So health and safety often talks a lot about being physically safe in the workplace. Psychological safety also needs to have its own level of risk assessment. It also has to have its own conversation as well. And what affects psychological safety is those toxic workplaces, those workplaces that don't necessarily deal with things in the way we feel they should be dealt with. Workplace wellness can also support employee engagement. So people who come to work, who feel supported, who feel that actually their lives are important to an organisation, are more likely to be engaged. They're more likely going to want to be involved. They're going to more likely be wanting to increase their performance. Wellness as well, absence. How high are your wellness? How high are your sick absence scores at the moment? How many people have you got off on long-term sick? Why are they off on long-term sick? How many people have you got in terms of short-term absence? Why are they off? Are those things that your wellness procedures, policies, are they things that your wellness policies are targeting? If you have one of the fastest growing demographics at the moment is women of a certain age. So women 45 to 60 going through the menopause. Are you seeing an increase in women currently taking time off, not being as productive at work, maybe ending up in more conflicts than they would have possibly been in the past? There's a possibility that there is a menopausal link there. From the point of view of they're going through something and they may not be able to talk about it. Do you support women in your workplace going through the menopause? So absence is a really key thing. When I worked, just a little bit about myself, I worked for Royal Mail for 17 years before joining TCM as a resolution consultant. While I was at Royal Mail, I did quite a big piece of work as a full-time mediator, a big piece of work around sick absence and looking at why people were off sick. And one of the biggest reasons people were off sick, you might think was stress, was actually sickness and diarrhea, gastrointestinal problems. And when I started talking to some of the people that were off sick for those reasons, it had nothing to do with the fact that they had gastrointestinal problems. It was because of something else. And it was a reason to escape for a day. Yeah, lots of sickness and diarrhea and sore backs. Yes, yes. But also when we are not feeling well, whether it be physically or mentally, that can manifest itself as a physical condition. So for example, if you suffer from depression and anxiety, quite often you will have stomach upsets. You will suffer from headaches. If you're somebody with diabetes, you may suffer from low energy, which makes it very difficult to get out of bed in the morning to come to work. And sometimes it's easy to pick up the phone and go, oh, I've got a sickness bug, boss, than it is to say, you know what, today I'm having a bad mental health day. Today I'm struggling with my diabetes. Today, you know, I've got caring responsibilities. I was up caring for my mother until 10, 11, 12 o'clock last night, and I just do not have the energy to bring myself into work today. It's about looking about what sits behind. And productivity is one of the biggest things in terms of wellness of employees. And it's often the thing that ends up disappearing down a performance management conversation. And rather than actually dealing with what sits behind it, more often than not, what we do is we have that performance management conversation that doesn't go particularly well, which actually probably exacerbates the problem. So for companies that don't have a thorough workplace wellbeing plan, they are at risk of struggling with lower productivity and an unhappy workforce. But that is not all of the story. It's not as simple as saying, we have this wellness plan, we're going to put this in and that's going to fix everything. It won't. It won't. So it's about looking what's behind. Now the CIPD have just launched some new research. It's come out in the last week, I think it is, and it's around workplace wellbeing. So just bear with me while I just share my screen a second. So it's around wellness, wellbeing, and it was conducted during COVID. Now, I've not touched much on COVID while I've been talking, but obviously COVID sits in the background as well, and we all have our own ideas and opinions in terms of COVID, but that obviously sits in the background as well. In terms of the latest research, what the CIPD found is that 51% of companies are treating wellbeing as a strategic priority. So it's really a big part of their strategy, is really a big part of what they're doing on their day-to-day. But 1 in 5 companies are still doing nothing to improve health and wellbeing. Now, there could be lots of reasons for that. They could be very small companies that may not have the budget to do it. But that's a bit of a concern for somebody like me that sees wellbeing as a strategic priority personally and professionally. To hear that 1 in 5 companies are not doing anything is a concern. The primary focus, as I've said, is mental health. The primary focus for the majority of wellbeing practice within an organisation is around mental health, which is brilliant. But believe it or not, there's still not enough being done. In terms of mental health first aid, which is one of the courses that I teach through TCM, Mental Health First Aid England recommend 1 in 10 employees be a mental health first aider. We're nowhere near that figure. I'm constantly being asked for support in terms of training managers to have better conversations when it comes to mental health. And that's something that I'll cover in a little while. There's very limited focus on men's health and women's reproductive health. So I've touched on that a little bit already, but it's not just about the menopause. What about those of the members of staff that you have, the women that you have that have really, really bad periods and actually can't get out of bed for 2 days or 3 days or 4 days a month, or sometimes longer if you're really, really unfortunate? It's not a pleasant experience. What about those families that are struggling with with fertility issues? They won't just affect the women, they're more likely affect the men as well. And that gets lost because we don't expect men to worry about things like that when actually they do. The least focus is on financial well-being, and that is a big part of well-being. It's a massive part of well-being, because if you don't have enough money to live, and we all know how much prices have gone up recently, I think the number this morning was 7% in the last month, that prices have gone up. If you can't afford to put food on your table, if you can't afford to keep a roof over your house, over your head rather, if you can't afford to keep your house, if you can't afford to pay your rent, what impact is that going to have on you in the workplace? Are you going to be able to focus knowing that it doesn't matter how hard you work, you still can't pay your bills this month? It's one of the most neglected areas, is financial well-being, but actually it's one of the biggest anchors for us as human beings, knowing we have enough money to live. If we don't have enough money to live, it has a massive impact on every area of our lives. And the last one is around presenteeism and leaveism. So presenteeism is working while ill, essentially still coming into the office. That has been on the increase majority of the time because more people are working from home or have been working from home. So it's a bit easier to still turn up to work if you have a cold. I know if anybody turned up with a cold in the office I used to work in the centre of Sheffield, we always used to say, stay away from me, I don't want that. Why have you bothered coming into work? Well, if you're ill, it's easier to work from home than call in sick. Leaveism is working while you're on annual leave. That is massively on the rise. Majority of that is due to workloads. Majority of that is due to workloads and people feeling that they cannot cope with those workloads. And I'm not saying whether those workloads are right or wrong. Basically, people are taking time off to catch up. I'm guilty of that. I'm pretty sure there are a fair number on this session today that are also guilty of that. I freely admit that I do work when I shouldn't. I'm doing work at 9 o'clock at night. I'll work on weekends. I'll work when I'm off. Sometimes we feel like we can't help it. The problem comes when we are expected to do that, to keep up. And this is what I mean about sometimes some of these well-being practices are sticking plasters. They're not getting to the root cause of the issue. Instead of, when you're on annual leave, leave your laptop here. It should be a conversation about, why do you feel you need to do that work while you're off? Why do you feel you need to open that email at 10 o'clock at night? When we're talking about absence, why do you have so many people off with stress? You've got this wonderful well-being practice that you've brought in, but you've still got high levels of stress in the organisation. You've got 3 people in the same department not performing at the same level they were last year. Why is that? Or why have you woken up this morning not able to do the job as well as you maybe could do yesterday or last week or last month? That's why I asked at the beginning, how are you feeling today? So it's not just about those well-being policies. They are great, absolutely great. Some of the ones I've seen while I was at Royal Mail, there was some brilliant work being done around well-being, particularly actually around financial well-being, which is why I was quite surprised by that being the least focused. But again, I'll come back to that in a second. But what lies beneath? So what's going on underneath all of those issues? Now, it could be as simple as that particular type of work is high stress. We all know that the NHS in particular is under a lot of pressure at the moment. Yeah, we all know that there are certain pockets of industry that are under more pressure than others at the moment. Coming out of COVID, going into hybrid working, not knowing if you've got to be in the office or not, that's going to have an impact as well. That goes back to the autonomy element of the psychological safety I talked about earlier on. Do you have control over where you work? I've had a few people recently that have said, I've been told I've got to come back into the office and I'm terrified. I've got an immune disease, I've got an autoimmune disease. I've got issues with my immunity. I'm struggling with diabetes. Working from home, I've been the healthiest I've been for years. Coming back into the office scares me because I'm putting myself back in that place where I'm not going to feel well. Are you having those conversations? I just want to touch on stress very briefly. Anybody that's been on the mental health first aid course, you know what I'm just about to cover. But if you haven't, I would like to introduce you to the stress container. So the stress container is essentially a bucket we all carry around. And what we carry in that bucket are everyday stresses and strains. So these are the things that make us feel at work that we are not as well as we could be. So we may have an elderly mother who isn't doing very well at that moment in time. We may ourselves be struggling with something like diabetes or reproductive health or just paying our bills that week. And then we're giving another project to do. We're expected to work with somebody we don't particularly get on with. And what's happening during that day is that bucket is filling up as those little stresses are drip feeding into it. So that bucket is filling up with water as we're going through the day, as we're going through the week, as we're going through the month. You've got a little bit of capacity in that bucket. So the bucket should never be completely full. There should always be capacity for the things that come out of the blue unexpected. But all the time we've got those stresses flowing through. Now, if we have a tap on that bucket, we can let some of that water out. What that tap represents are the strategies to help us let that water out. Now, that could be a workplace's wellbeing strategy. It may be that you have access to an employee assistance program and therefore can access counselling. Great coping strategy, really, really productive coping strategy, talking to somebody about what's going on for you. But what if the everyday stress that's coming into your container isn't covered by that wellness strategy? Where do you go to for support and help? So the type of coping strategies we're talking about, the good ones are the ones that let the water out. They reduce that stress level, which means you've got a greater capacity to take those things that do come through. Some of those things are self-care. So that could be meditation, it could be exercise, it could be having a general healthy lifestyle, it could be having regular social interaction, alongside that support that the workplace can offer as well. But beware of false taps, taps that are blocked, taps that actually work in the opposite direction and let more water in. They're the ones that I mentioned earlier on: the smoking, the substance abuse, the going to bed late and getting up early just to try and get work done. I call that burning, I think everybody calls it burning the candle at both ends. I'm terrible for that. By the time it gets to Friday, all I want to do is sleep all weekend. That's not helpful. And I know it's not helpful, and it's sometimes recognizing that's not helpful. If we rely too much on false taps, or if we don't do anything to reduce the water level, that's when it overflows. That's the point in the workplace that we see people going off sick, short or long term. Regardless of what it's for, it could be for a physical ailment, it could be for a mental health concern. We see productivity reduce. All those things that I talked about earlier on, that list of things that I talked about earlier on in terms of engagement, absence, productivity, psychological safety, they all go out the window if we're not emptying our stress containers. That's why wellness practices in the workplace are so important, but it's also why it's so important that we get underneath. So in terms of getting underneath, do you really know what's going on in your organisation? So just some more facts and figures from that study: 38% of HR respondents believed managers have the confidence to have sensitive conversations. That's less than 50% of managers have the confidence to have the conversation. Whether it be about mental health, whether it be about productivity in the workplace, whether it be about sick absence. Less than 50% of managers have felt to have the confidence to have those conversations. Fewer still, 29%, believe managers have the confidence and competence to spot the early warning signs of mental ill health. So less than a third of managers can spot the signs that somebody is struggling. Management style is still among the most common causes of workplace stress. Do your wellbeing practices tackle that? Yeah, you may get offered counselling. You can go and talk to somebody else about the fact that you feel micromanaged by your manager. But who's actually tackling those behaviours? Who's ensuring that those people can actually be the supportive person that they need to be? Is your working environment conducive to having that supportive, inclusive, fair and just environment? So when it comes to wellbeing practices, it's more than just shoehorning those things in. It's about training, building knowledge, equipping your managers and beyond in terms of understanding those warning signs for mental health. So put them on a mental health first aid course. Again, as through myself and through TCM, I do offer those courses. There's mental health awareness courses. There are now courses for male managers to understand about the menopause better, to better support that growing demographic. So it is about building knowledge. If you don't really know what's going on for your organisation, look to do a neutral evaluation. Again, something that can be offered by TCM. What a neutral evaluation does, rather than an investigation that investigates people, a neutral evaluation investigates a particular situation. So do you have a team where your engagement scores have suddenly dropped, or they've been consistently low and you don't really know why? Have you suddenly had increased sick absence in a particular area? Or is sick absence something that you are struggling to understand? A neutral evaluation can come in and help you understand by talking to the people in an impartial, non-judgmental and supportive way, getting them to tell us, or telling whoever does the neutral evaluation, exactly what's going on for them. It helps you dig deep. It helps you dig underneath what's going on, so that those wellbeing practices that you've invested so much time and money in actually have a chance to bear fruit, to give you that return on investment. In terms of management style, sometimes that's about the policies and procedures that we employ as an organisation. The ACAS code has basic standards in terms of the policies and procedures, but nowhere in the ACAS code does it say you have to have a grievance policy. You have to have a bullying and harassment policy. So consider the resolution framework instead. Because what the resolution framework does is it enables you to build a culture of fair, just, inclusive and sustainable, high-performing employees. It does exactly the same as a grievance and a bullying and harassment process would do, but it does it in a way that brings people with you, that encourages people to look after themselves, that encourages people to speak to each other in a respectful way, that encourages informal resolution rather than those damaging, hugely damaging combative policies that we all know and probably don't love. I certainly don't. I hated investigating them and then being directly involved in them. Be vocal about what you offer. So when I was at Royal Mail, one of the things Royal Mail did really well was about financial support. So one of the things they brought in was something called Neighbour, N-E-Y-B-E-R. And what that does is it helped people through salary sacrifice to take back control of their finances, but nobody knew about it. So when you're bringing in these wellbeing practices, when you're offering this training that supports those managers to better understand how to have those conversations, talk about it, be vocal about it, let people know that they're available and make them easy to access. Don't hide them away. Don't make people have to go through their line manager to get that support. So in terms of those wellbeing practices, it is about making sure that they are right for the situation. So you need to understand what's going on. Once you've understood what's going on, it's about putting the right practice in place. Yes, that might be wellbeing practices. It might be mental health first aiders, but it also might be training in confident conversations, quality conversations, another product that is offered by TCM. Teaching managers how to have conversations in a way that demonstrates that psychological safety. Look at what lies beneath, do a neutral evaluation, have the conversation. Nothing is ever made worse by having a conversation. It's only going to make things better. It's only going to help people know that that support and guidance is there. So I'm aware I've been talking for a while. Robin, I'm okay to open it to any questions. I know there's quite a few comments in the chat as well, people agreeing with me on certain things, especially around the female reproductive issues. Definitely, yeah, it's good to know I'm not alone on that one.
Well, I think I speak for everyone that this has been really eye-opening so far, very interesting, so thank you. This part is open for anyone to just ask questions about anything, but I've got a few just to get us warmed up, or in case anyone's too shy to ask. Firstly, it would be good to know, what would you say are the early signs of mental ill health?
The main early warning sign is a change in behaviour. We don't always notice them because we tend to be quite wrapped up in our own world. So sometimes it is about putting your head above the parapet, especially if you're a line manager, putting your head above the parapet and actually having a look at what's going on for your staff. It's even more difficult in the workplace at the moment, where you've got the vast majority of people still probably working from home or working virtually. But the kind of signs you're looking for, has somebody suddenly started becoming sort of quite irritable, out of character irritable, or do they just feel down? You know, are you on a video call with them and they've always got the video switched off? Whereas before they probably were quite engaged. When you speak to them, is it, instead of it being, oh, hi, how are you? Is it, yeah, hi, you know, is everything, you know, it's that change in tone that demonstrates that there might be something else going on. Some of the other things you might see high or low moods. more frequently and out of character. Worry, anxiety, are they suddenly going off with a lot of gastrointestinal issues? Is usually one of the first signs that I tend to see people going off sick because they're struggling with anxiety. Hits me in the stomach. Other people I know it hits them in the chest in terms of that anxiety. So are you seeing them spending more time withdrawing, either through absence or through sort of meetings, not attending? Any other dramatic changes you might have seen as well? These might not be as obvious. It might be a case of having a chat to other people around as well, but are they eating more? Are they sleeping more? Are they eating less or sleeping less? But the biggest things are those out of character behavioural changes, which might be very, very small to start with, but they'll grow legs. They will grow legs.
Okay, great. Can you explain the link, just thinking more about what TCM does, between well-being and workplace conflict? Yeah,
it's a cause and effect relationship. Put yourself in a position where you are struggling with a particular conflict. It could be just a little niggle with a person sat next to you. It could be, you just don't have a relationship with your line manager for whatever reason. Thinking about that stress container for a second, you think about all those little times you have to sit next to that person. That's drip feeding into your stress container. It's making it more and more difficult for you to have maybe a civil conversation with that person, which feeds that conflict. All the time this is dripping into your stress container, it's reducing your capacity to deal with anything else. So if you're in conflict with somebody that you're sat next to, that you work for, that you work with, if something comes along, you might react irritably with that person, which then generates conflict elsewhere. You may pick up the phone to another team and start complaining about your team to them. That then creates conflict between the two teams. So it starts to grow legs. And as we all know with conflict never involves two people, it involves a cast of thousands. So if it's affecting two people at that team, I guarantee it'll be affecting 20 or 30 or 200. I know I dealt with a case in Royal Mail that was well-being related. Actually, somebody suffered from severe hay fever, and the person next to them opened the window, which immediately increased their hay fever symptoms. They fell out. They can't get in a van or couldn't get in a van together anymore. So we ended up having to do mediation to actually try and reset that relationship. So there's a huge cause and effect relationship between well-being and conflict. The other thing to consider with that as well, as that stress container is filling, it makes us more vulnerable to developing something more than just stress. So if there's something, if you're already suffering from mental health conditions, so if you suffer from anxiety or from depression and your stress container is filling, it's only going to make that condition 10 times worse. If you don't suffer from a condition, that overflowing stress container can actually start one. So yeah, huge link between the two.
Okay, great. That makes a lot of sense. I saw someone called Stephanie had their hand up. If you still wanted to ask a question, there's a couple in the chat function as well.
Thanks. I'm really fascinated by what you've been talking about, Mary, so thank you so much. I just wondered what your thoughts were. I read a statistic by the CIPD the other day, and it was sort of on the back of COVID and the attention that employers had been paying to well-being, and there was a statistic saying something like that has dropped ever so slightly. I think, I can't remember the exact, but it was like maybe like 70 to 63% roughly. And I just wonder what your thoughts were on the direction of travel.
Yeah, I saw exactly the same statistic. It's in exactly the same research study that I was reading, and it's about 5%. My personal view is, unfortunately, I think it's going to continue to drop, because I think there's a lot of organisations that think, oh, we've done enough. And actually, we've got past COVID, we don't need to focus on that anymore. But I may be doing a disservice. I'd like to think that's not going to be the case, but I am really, really concerned that now COVID's gone. Yes. But now COVID's gone, apparently, that actually we don't need to do as much to support people anymore. As I say, I'm hoping I'm doing a disservice, but that is a big concern for me. And what that says to me is that there's still that 49% of companies out there that are not treating it as a strategic priority. not recognising actually the impact that having a well workforce has on their bottom line, basically.
Yeah, thanks so much. I agree. I think it's concerning.
Thank you.
Somebody in the chat has asked about your point regarding cost of living having increased. They're currently looking at financial well-being. What is out there or available as formal training around that current situation, if you're aware of anything?
The biggest thing, and I've actually used it, is Neighbour. Absolutely brilliant service. Organisations can bring it in and they can actually provide that financial wellbeing support, as well as providing the opportunity for people to take back control. I would certainly have a chat with whoever delivers your occupational health, because I'm the only one I'm aware of, which is probably a sign of why it's not a strategic priority, is Neighbour. And it's because I've been directly involved in it. Your occupational health service will probably be able to provide greater direction in terms of that, but I can highly recommend Neighbour.
Okay, great. Tabitha has asked, are there any standout strategies that employers can use to promote that open and honest culture surrounding health and well-being?
Yeah, the resolution framework. Yeah, I know I work for TCM, but I passionately believe that the processes and procedures we use now, all they do is generate conflict. And as we know, conflict has a direct link to well-being, as I've just said. So employing a resolution framework that focuses on resolution rather than two people, one person's raised a grievance, right, we're going to separate those two people, and what that's going to do, it's going to generate further conflict over here. It's going to generate conflict between the two people that are on either side of the grievance. And rarely do grievances get to the root cause of the problem. I don't know anybody that's ever come out of a grievance that's felt satisfied by the result. The resolution policy takes that and rips it up and focuses on people talking to each other and resolving issues at the earliest possible point. And it's a complete culture change as well. It's about transforming your organisation into exactly that open and honest culture.
Yeah, I completely agree. Okay, so back to my list of questions. Thanks everyone for asking some. If you have any more, please just feel free to ask. So if, say, for example, if I feel like I'm struggling with my mental well-being, or someone feels that way, but they're apprehensive about telling their line manager, how would they approach this? Okay,
so first things first, we keep making the distinction between mental and physical health. They are one and the same. We do not have mental health without physical health. We do not have physical health without mental health. So they're exactly the same. You wouldn't hesitate to talk to your boss if you had a broken leg. Yeah. So, and I know that's simplifying things, but we find it so much easier probably to talk about the physical than we do the mental. First thing, take care of yourself. It takes a lot of energy and bravery to share something like that. I never shared at Royal Mail quite how bad my depression and anxiety was. Until I had one particular manager who happens to be a TCM consultant now. I had one particular manager who encouraged me to talk about it. If you are going to have the conversation, take time beforehand to think about actually what do you need from work? What do you need from your manager? What is it your manager needs to do to help support you? And have a think as well about how your mental well-being might be affecting your work. So, for example, antidepressants make it really, really difficult for people to function sometimes first thing in the morning. So it might be a case of having the conversation with your manager along the lines of, I need a bit of support. I'm struggling to get up in the morning. Is there any chance I can do 10 till 6 instead of 9 till 5? Be specific about what it is. Find the right time and place. Don't try and do it 5 minutes before your manager's going into a meeting. Yeah, because all you're going to get is a hurried response. They're not going to be listening to you. So make time for it. If you have regular one-to-ones, ask to have that conversation as part of your one-to-one. You know, you need to allow yourself to give it more than 5 minutes. It's okay for you to talk about this stuff. Yeah. Be clear and concise, but professional and appropriate. Your line manager doesn't need to know your life story. Yeah. But there are things that you may feel you need to share. So it's about understanding what you need to share versus what you're comfortable sharing. And if you have concerns about contacting your line manager directly, speak to someone you trust. Now, you may know who your mental health first aiders are. They're the first people I would make a beeline for, is your mental health first aiders. But failing that, there should be somebody that you can go to and have the conversation. So even if it's not a direct line manager, just find that person that you can have that conversation with.
Okay, that's really helpful. There's a question in the chat that's kind of similar, but Matt's got his hand up, so we'll go to Matt and then I'll we'll go to the chat. Go to Matt, go to the chat.
Hi Marie, so sort of reversing that question a little bit. So if you're a manager or any employee and in a situation where you are seeing perhaps signs of some mental ill health, but at the level where it becomes quite severe and serious, so I'm thinking if you can spot signs of, schizophrenia, bipolar, psychosis, something like that, but the person is not saying that there's anything wrong or they seem to be functioning, what do you think the best approach, if you're concerned about them, might be?
So don't be afraid to ask. So right at the very beginning, I asked everybody how they were. And I was genuine about it. Okay. I genuinely wanted to know how everybody was. If you're struggling to get that genuineness across, ask twice. So quite often, if somebody, it doesn't matter if it's a serious condition or something less serious, you're just having a bad day, it doesn't matter. How you approach that conversation will be relatively the same from the point of view of, I would never accept somebody's first answer, because more often than not, that first answer is a reflex. Yeah, I'm fine. No, I'm genuinely asking how you are. I want to make time for this conversation. I've noticed you're not quite yourself. So let's kind of have a coffee and have a conversation about what's going on for you. So be genuine about it. Make time and space for that conversation. Exactly the same as if you were approaching your manager, you need to afford the same respect and offer that time and space as well. So again, don't try and have a conversation with somebody you have concerns about 5 minutes before a meeting. Yeah. Actively listen. How many of us listen to respond rather than listen to hear? So when you say to somebody, how are you? Yeah, I'm fine. No, really, genuinely, how are you? You need to follow that up with that active listening. So it is about genuinely listening, summarizing back, reflecting back. What I think I've heard you say is this. Talk to me more about that. Ask those open questions. And the biggest thing for me is become mental health aware. Do a mental health first aid course. It's 2 days. The sessions I run, I do them online over 4 mornings, and you become a mental health first aider. You are equipped to have those conversations. If you're not wanting to become a mental health first aider, there are many mental health awareness courses out there. Just go and build your understanding. Go and read more about it. Go and research it. The same as you would do potentially if somebody had a physical condition, or even if it's just something that's bothering a member of staff. You would take the time to just go and maybe I'll go and read a little bit about that. You should be doing the same in terms of mental well-being as well.
Thanks, Mary.
So a couple of people asked in the chat about resources, and specifically what can small organisations with few financial resources do to implement useful policies and changes?
Okay, so a lot of the mental health charities, a lot of, I think there's Menopause at Work. There's quite a few charities out there that offer support for small and medium-sized enterprises that are struggling in terms of that cash flow to get those things through. So the support is out there, but sometimes you just need to dig a little bit further. I know Mind have some excellent resources. Mental Health First Aid at Work have some excellent resources. So there's Menopause at Work. I can probably, Robin, I'll send you a couple of links in terms of maybe the female reproductive health side of things, where support can be found. Obviously, in terms of TCM, in terms of myself as a TCM consultant, there are ways of being able to support for some of the courses we run are a lot lower budget than some of the biggest ones we know. We're not talking about people becoming mediators, we're talking about managers understanding how to have those conversations. So the kind of courses that TCM runs to support that are across the entire budget. Don't be afraid to sort of reach out to companies, because actually there's a lot of organisations that are genuinely supportive, and they want to make the conversation better and make the support better for people. So don't let budget be the thing that stops you from having the conversation, at least.
Yeah, and just a note, after the session, when we follow up, everyone will receive a recording of the session, and all the resources that we're speaking about today we'll send around as well. So hopefully they'll be useful. Somebody has asked, what if the line manager is concerned about an employee's mental health, has had frank conversations about it, helped the employee to get more counselling at no cost for the employee, but they seem to ignore the scale of the problem and the impact on their productivity and ability to perform the job? Any advice?
Well, putting my mental health first aider hat on for a second, as opposed to my manager / HR professional. One of the things that you're taught in the mental health first aid course is you can only help somebody so much. They have to want to get that help as well. So there is that line there where you can only do so much for people. What I would suggest, if they're getting counselling, that their counsellor is probably working with them. You may be able, through their occupational health process, through your occupational health service, you may be able to have a conversation with them about the support or information that could be passed on to the counsellor to help support those conversations. I know I was involved in a case at Royal Mail that was very similar to that, actually, and the person actually ended up leaving the job, which I know kind of solves the problem for the organisation, but doesn't solve the problem for the person. So it's about encouraging them that the help is there and to take access of it. But you can only do so much for people. I know that's probably a non-answer, but I know personally how frustrating it is to try and help somebody and they're not taking the help. That's where you need to sometimes take a step back and go, actually, we're going to have to do what we don't want to do. We're going to have to put them down the performance management process. We're going to have those difficult conversations with them. So it's about equipping yourself with the tools to have those difficult conversations in a respectful, resolution-focused way. But at the same time, helping them recognise that if they're not willing to get the help, there's not a huge amount you can do.
Okay, thank you. I think this is a nice way to finish off. We've got about 5 minutes left. And also, if anyone has any further questions, please just feel free to email me and I'll try to pick Marie's brains another time. But what are some quick and easy ways to prioritise wellbeing, both at work and at home, that anyone could action every day?
Yeah, so the biggest thing for me is just understanding that self-care is not selfish. You cannot pour from an empty cup. And I know that gets bandied around a lot in terms of self-care, but it is as important as breathing, eating and drinking. You know, we need to make sure that we do look after ourselves. So it is about being deliberate and finding what works for you. Now, in terms of self-care, it has to be something that promotes health and happiness for you, not what you think somebody thinks you should be doing, what works for you. Okay, so one of the simplest things that I'm trying to do is say no and create better boundaries for myself between work and home, which is difficult because I work from home. My office is in my kitchen. So, you know, it's very, very difficult for me to escape work. But what I'm trying to do is create those boundaries for myself. That is self-care. It doesn't have to be, oh, I need to do a 5-mile hike today. It could just be 5 minutes sat with a cup of tea looking out the window. If you like sitting for an hour every night watching Netflix, if it promotes that health and happiness for you, sit and watch Netflix for an hour. I'm addicted to Line of Duty at the moment. I've powered my way through the first 5 series quite quickly, but God, I've enjoyed doing it. And it's really helped refresh my mind and make me think about something completely different. So the biggest thing for me is find out what works for you, be deliberate about it, make time for it. Don't worry about carving out an hour here or 20 minutes there, 5 minutes. Just make 5 minutes immediately after today, immediately after this session. Walk away from your desk for 5 minutes and go and get some fresh air. I don't know where all of you are today, but in Sheffield, the sun is out, the sky is blue. I'm immediately going outside with my dog. I've just bought her a new squeaky tennis ball, which thankfully she's not squeaked through this entire webinar. I'm going to go outside and play with her for 5 minutes. That is the self-care I'm going to do for myself. But yeah, be deliberate about it and do what works for you.
Perfect. I'm going to go outside as well. You've inspired me to do that, but unfortunately without a dog. Maybe I'll get one. That could be a good
That might be
self-care.
self-care, exactly.
Someone in the chat said about making self-care baskets. That's quite nice. That's a nice idea.
Yeah, I actually have a box just on that. I have a box full of things that I like to do. So there's a colouring book in there and some glittery pens, because I am a 5-year-old at heart. If I could build a blanket fort in my living room, I would do. So there's a bar of chocolate in there. There's my favourite CD, my favourite DVD. I know everything's digital now, but it reminds me that that's what I like to listen to when I want to look after myself. So yeah, brilliant idea.
There's a few people leaving their information in the chat. That's really nice to have like a little network building up. That was the idea of the session, really. So I'm glad it's working. We've only got a couple of minutes left, so I'm just going to say thanks to everyone for joining, and thanks so much to Marie for sharing your wisdom. And I'll leave it to Marie to sign off.
Yeah, thank you. This is something I'm hugely passionate about. Wellbeing generally is something that we seem to talk about but don't truly talk about. So it's like the how are you? Be genuine about it, be deliberate about it. So if you only do 2 things today, make 5 minutes for yourself immediately after this session. Go and do something that is not related to anything you've done this morning. Go and do something fun for you. And secondly, the next time you ask somebody how they are, be deliberate about it and ask twice.
Perfect. Thanks so much, everyone, for joining us. Have a lovely Easter weekend.
Yeah, long weekend. Thank you.
Hey, Steve. Steve's